here we go. I started with a handful of grunge and rusty and dirt textures and some watercolor textures, and that's what we're going to be used to be building this thing. So we'll drag those into After Effects, create a new comp, 720 is fine, and then we'll move this to 16 bits per channel. We're going to start with this nice rust on iron. Just kind of reposition this until I find something that looks nice. Looks about good. Now we're going to create a new adjustment layer. Command Option Y on a Mac, Control Option or Alt Y on PC. Going to add a fast blur, and we're going to blur this thing out quite a bit, because all I'm wanting is the color. Also add a tint just to desaturate it a little bit. Back this off to 50. 5. That looks about right. We will also add some curves to darken it down just a little bit. We'll just kind of pull this down. Alright. Getting a little bit of banding in this, but that's not too big of a deal because we're going to be sticking stuff on top of it and we won't really notice. Now we're going to go back and add this scratched metal. Let's take this on top and rotate it. And then we'll scale this up so that it fits and reposition it until we find some nice stuff. Looks about good. Now we're going to change this blend mode to soft light. Alright, just keep things organized. We'll change this to blur and tint. Now we're going to go and add on our scratchy metal. Change this one to color dodge. We will also scale this one down. And then find some nice textures. These scratches are nice. You can use pretty much any textures you want. I'm just using any grunge textures that I can find and stacking them up in different ways to keep things interesting. Okay, now we're going to go back and grab this rusted steel plate, drag it in, and change this blend mode to soft light again. Scale it. I'm hitting S to bring up the scale parameters. And then you can move it around. Oftentimes it comes in nice in the center, but sometimes needs to be adjusted. I'll save this while I'm thinking about it. Call this tutorial. I think this looks alright so far. Let's add a new adjustment layer and warm things up a bit. I'm going to add a photo filter, but we'll keep going. Let's add another adjustment layer, Command Option Y. Going to add a fast blur and a mask. Go up here to the rectangle one, double click on it, and it will just fill it to what you can see. Go here, change it to Subtract MM. To bring up the mask properties, we'll change this to, I don't know, 25, and then we will shrink it in a little bit. We're not seeing anything because there's nothing applied to this. Go back up to our blur. Let's say a nice 25. Whoa. Call this blur edges. This is just pulling our eye away from the edges just a little bit, and it will look a little better once we keep stacking stuff on top of this. Now we're going to add another adjustment layer. I love adjustment layers. They're pretty much my favorite thing, actually. Okie dokie. We're going to go into blue channel. Actually, first we're going to add a little mask on this. Double click and it gives us a nice ellipse. Change this to subtract, and we'll feather it a lot, like 300 for right now. Okay, in the blue, drag this down, which will take blue out, and this is essentially giving us some nice yellowish edges around things. We can pull in this a little bit. Might even go into the red channel and bump it up just a little bit warmer. There we go. Call this yellow vignette. Now I'm going to go add another vignette just to darken the edges a little bit. Another adjustment layer, mask, subtract, feather. Yeah, let's do 400 curves. And we'll pull this down just a smidge. Maybe a bit much right now. All right, now on to the title. And we'll name this, for tidiness sake, okay. We'll add a title. You can either click on the type tool up here or Command, Shift, Option, and T, and it will create one right in the middle. So we'll start typing. Mad Max. Go in, make it centered. Whoop. Select all of it. Make sure it's got too much space. Now we will pre-compose this layer. We'll call it type, and we'll jump inside. I suppose I should have done this to start with, but sometimes I'm lazy. Gonna go add our 3 rivets, steel, drag this on top. Way too big. We'll also rotate it 90. Go in next to the track mat, hit this T for transparency. If you don't see that, you can do toggle switches or mode, or right click on any of these. This setting is in mode. Bring up the scale again. And that looks cool. Now we'll go stick another one on, grab our nice rust on iron from before, and to put that on top, click the T. This is what it's doing, is following the alpha from below it, so whatever it is still transparent. Scale this down a bunch. We'll change this transfer mode to screen. That just lets us see through the dark areas a little bit. Now we'll go grab our dirt texture, drag this in. And once again, scale down. Transfer mode. Overlay. I'll even shrink that a little more. Now we can hop back over into this comp and we can see what our title looks like. And we can even go back, add some Fury Road, shrink this down. Make it big. That's hideous. Okay, to give this a little more variation so we can see through it in parts, we'll go and chop some holes in it. Let's go use our rust on iron once again. We will add some curves and tint to pull the color out. And we're going to darken this thing a lot. Just want this nice grungy stuff. We will scale this. Somewhere like that. Go in and change the blending mode to Silhouette Luma. That's going to do is where those bright parts where punch a hole in it so we can see through it. So we'll go back in here, just gives it a little bit more variation for this next step. Hop into our effects and presets, type Bevel Alpha, or just Bevel. It gives us a little bit of an edge, and then the default is a little too thick. Bring it down, all right. Drop shadow. I like to move this just a little for this one. Change the softness to 5, the opacity to G20. We're going to duplicate it. What I'm eventually going for is to get some nice long shadows that kind of smooth out the farther they get. So we'll add 10. Up this a couple. Let's take that back down. Okay, now we got some nice long shadows. We'll go color correct this text a bit to give it a little bit different of a look. We'll add a tint, desaturate it just a little bit, not that much. Yeah, just a bit. We're almost there. We'll add one more adjustment layer. Well, not one more. I'll probably keep adding stuff. We'll add some levels. We're just going to do some color correction just to give this a little bit more oomph. I'm going to take the brightness so that it matches. Pull that down. Let's go into the blue channel and take out some blue. Give this a little more yellowish of a look. There's before and after. Add some red to this. Nice warm desert feel. One more thing to kind of break this up and keep with the grunge feel. These edges are a little too sharp and crisp and straight for my tastes. So we're going to go through and break them up. New adjustment layer, we're going to put this below and go over and pick roughen edges. I like this one a lot. And the default, again, looks terrible. Take the scale down a lot. And we'll take this border to 2. So now these aren't so aggressively vector. And that just breaks it up a little bit. Its title is not centered very nicely, so let's move it down. One thing I liked is these animated is they had a nice kind of ink bleed or oil spill or some kind of fluid look drifting on from the edges. What I did for that when I built mine was I grabbed this grungy watercolor texture, dropped it in, rotated it. Let's go the other way. Scale. Get some nice grunge. Okay, we're going to create a new comp. Command N, Control N. Call this bleed. Going to make a new solid. This one can be white. Go over here and add film burn. Finally found a use for this pour effect. It's kind of funny looking, but it works. Set a keyframe. Go forward a little ways. And have it black out. What this normally does is used for a transition, I suppose. So it goes transparent, so we want to get rid of that. I'm going to go and add solid composite. Change this one to black. And you can play around with the different settings, the random seed for this to get a look that fits a little better for you. I'll add some fractal noise, change this to overlay. And we'll change the complexity to something higher. Now we're going to add a vector blur. Essentially what we're doing here is just making our own ink bleed. Ideally, you would go and film some wet paper and dump some ink on it or food coloring or something. But sometimes you don't have that option, so I'm going to show you how to do it all with After Effects plugins. Again, it won't look as good as actual photography, but for the sake of what we're doing, it works quite nicely. Let's move the center of this thing over here. That's kind of cool. Let's go back in and add some more fractal noise on that. Change this one to overlay as well. But this one we're going to back the opacity off a lot. That just gives it a little bit more variation in the color. This time we're going to add the brightness and contrast. You can do this with levels or any of those. They all work. And we're just going to crush this till it looks gross. And this is going to give us a Luma matte to bleed on that grungy watercolor texture. Go back to our comp, bring in the bleed, stick it on top of the grunge, and change the blend mode of the grunge to Luma inverted. So then as this goes, it's going to bleed on the different parts. And that looks dumb. So we're going to put it below the type. And change the blend mode of this thing to something amazing, like multiply. Where are you, multiply? Here we go. Almost looks like mold. Maybe we'll take the opacity down a wee bit. Let's go with 70. It's a good even number. And you could say stop it at one point or color correct this thing. To make it so that the watercolor is a little less aggressive. Yeah, it's kind of cool. Let's go in and add that scale. So because these are all different layers, you could either pre-compose them, or for the sake of simplicity, we'll just make a new null object, Command-Shift-Option-Y, or go to Layer, New Null Object, which essentially is an invisible object that you can attach stuff to, and it will control it. Kind of useful. Let's put it right here. We'll take all these except for that adjustment layer, drag the pick whip, parent it to the null, bring up our scale, set head keyframe, go to the end, and have it scale up a little bit. Actually, what we should probably do is take these two along with it. So now it's just going to scale just a little. All these settings can be tweaked and modified to fit whatever you'd like, but hopefully this gives all of you a great starting point to start creating some cool looking titles. Thanks for watching.